I'm gonna be honest with you, I really felt kind of intimidated standing up here trying to teach you guys how to turn platters, especially when we just had Jimmy Clues and we're gonna have Al Sturr. Jimmy Clues, to me, is considered a master demonstrator, and you know, and what we're having next is basically a master platter turner. He's gonna do round platters, square platters, and his embellishment is just unbelievable. So I felt it was real hard for me to stand up here and basically saying, I'm going to teach you between them. So I came up with another topic that for my head would have been a little bit easier, and it's platters my way, okay? And you can see that's crossed out. Because again, I started analyzing platters my way, and that's not really what's important. Really what's important here is how you guys turn platters. So I came up with my third topic, and that's tips and hints on turning platters your way. Okay?
That's it for tonight.
That's it. Then we're gonna go ahead. Okay, since I'm giving a demo tonight, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a little bit of time here and give you my philosophy on demonstrations, on demonstrations and on turning. I've been to a lot of demos, regionally, nationally, and locally. And I've seen some real good demonstrations, and I've seen some demonstrations really not that great. But even the ones that weren't that great, I always found something or heard something that I wanted to go home and try and incorporate into my wood turning technique. So it's something you need to think about when you're listening to these demos. Okay, I've seen some turners basically insinuate, look, buy my tool, stand this way, and do everything I do, and they insinuate that your pieces are going to look like theirs. Okay, now this is not reality, okay? But it is still a good idea for anybody starting out in wood turning to go ahead and find a real good wood turner, whether he's in the club or go see a national demonstration, and basically take the basics and work with that basics for a week or so, and you'll be really surprised how fast you're going to start developing your own wood turning technique. Now, most of us in this room have been turning for more than 2 or 3 weeks, and you basically have your wood turning technique started. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and what should you be looking at these demonstrations? Well, let's first look at the demonstrator. Remember, the demonstrator is telling you what works for him. He's trying to help you avoid the mistakes and pitfalls that he did when he first started. What he's trying to do is help you accelerate and improve your wood turning technique. And he's basically trying to give you his experience. But the thing you got to know and remember, it's his experience, it's his opinion, and it's what works best for him, not necessarily what will work best for you. Okay, second, let's look at you as the audience. What should you be doing while sitting out there listening to the demonstration? Just that. You should be listening and watching. And when you go ahead and you hear a little tip or something special, you need to write it down, you need to go home, you need to try it. And if it fits into the way you turn things, you use it. You add it to your technique. If it doesn't work, you try and modify it. And you modify it so that it'll work a certain part of it. And if it doesn't work at all, you go ahead and get rid of it. So what am I trying to say here? Basically what I'm trying to say is you need to develop your own turning techniques that will give you the results that you are satisfied with. Okay, third, let's look at tool use. A lot of times it doesn't matter what tool you use. Now that's a pretty heavy statement. But what I'm trying to get at is you can take 3 pieces that all look the same, the finishes are good, by 3 different demonstrators, and you can ask them what tool he used. One of them will say you used a skew. Somebody will tell you you used a bowl gouge. Some people will say they use a negative rake round scraper. Okay? So what I'm getting at, they're the pieces. It doesn't really matter what tool you use. It's basically the results that count. If you're satisfied with the results, how you got there is what really counts the most. again, you'll hear people tell you how to hold the tool and how to stand, but as long as you're developing your own technique that works for you and you're happy with the results, again, that's what's important. And I want to give you a little bit of example of this, and I'm going to use my own experience with this. You take a bowl gouge. You hear people tell you how to take the bowl gouge. Basically, drop it 45 degrees, turn that bevel 45 degrees, put that thing up against your hip, bend your knees 45 degrees, swing back and forth 45 degrees. That's the rule of 45, by the way. But anyway, that's what they tell you to do. And you know what? It's probably the best way to do it, but it doesn't work for me. I've got a bad back, I've got bad knees. So what do? I'm basically changing it a little bit. And if you watch my turning, you'll probably see me turning with a little bit more arm movement, a little bit more wrist movement than I should. Not the best way to do it, but again, it's what works for me. So again, it's not the tool that's important. It's what you do with the tool. It's that finished product. And again, what's really important is if you're satisfied with it. And again, here's our problem. We're never satisfied. We're always searching for a better way to do things, to get that perfect cut, that perfect piece. So when it comes to demonstrations, you should be looking for those tips and those hints that you can take home and add to your techniques. And that's my philosophy on the turning. And now we're going to get into platters. Okay, platters, to me, are one of the best forms to work with, okay? To me, they seem to always be looking at you, okay? You take a look at this platter and you can see the grain, the figure, okay? You can work with that. You can work with your figure, and what I try and do is I try and get my figure right in the center. You can see a little bit of sapwood on either side. I try and balance the piece out. Sometimes when it comes to platters, you got to make a choice. Do you want a bigger platter, or do you want to go ahead and work with your figure? To me, if I got a real nice piece of wood and it's got beautiful figure, I kind of edge towards the figure. You know, do whatever I can to get that figure to pop out and look at you. If you look at this platter here, you'll notice that my figure down in the bottom of the bowl is basically bigger than what's on the sides, on top here, I mean on the edge. And again, with platters, you can take a platter and you lay it down on a table, and put it on a coffee table, and again, it's right there, everything that you're doing. If you've done some beautiful embellishing work, you can put it on a coffee table and it's there. Now, I used to do a lot of embellishments on bowls and everything, and you take that bowl and you put it on the coffee table, you don't see what I've done. All my bowls are on my mantle, about this high, for you to see it. So platters is really a beautiful way to turn and express yourself and get out, you know, you're turning and show that wood off. Okay. Now what do I mean by figure? This is just a piece of wood I cut. And again, I'll show you. Now most people, you take a look at this piece of wood, and the normal shape, you think a bowl. This is the bottom, this is the top. Now normally, that's what you would think if you were turning a bowl. But in reality, if you look at this, you look at your figure here, you can see normally your heart wood is usually the thickest, closest to the pith, okay? That's normally. And the bottom part, it kind of starts thinning out. So if I want the widest part to show in my bowl, how do I do that? Well, basically, you forget about the widest part of your bowl. And what you got to do is you got to come through this way. This is the face of the platter. And as you go deeper in there, that pith will get, that figure will get larger and larger. So that's what I'm talking about, a trade-off. Again, if you have a piece of wood that doesn't have the greatest figure, then yeah, I kind of lean towards go with the larger piece. But again, work with that figure. That's what's really, really important. Okay. Now platters, one of the most limiting, one more thing. Again, if you have a piece of wood this thick, how do I mount it? Okay, I got plenty of wood here. It really doesn't matter. However you guys like to mount your bowls, that's how I would mount my platter. Now I usually go ahead and mount it between centers. Okay, why do I mount it between centers? Because this piece of wood, I can adjust it on my lathe, north, south, east, west, okay? And I can even, being this thick, I can even do a certain amount of right or left type movement to work with my grain to get it where I want. You can see this piece of wood here. Let me point this out to you. This is kind of against just what I told you. And the reason is, if you look at this, here's the pith right here, okay? So normally, I would basically be, coming through this way, towards the pith. But after I trued it out and everything and looked at it, I said, wow, I kind of like this area better, okay? This area, to me, has better grain than this, okay? Now, maybe different for you, but that's just the way I felt. So I wanted something looking like this on the bottom of my platter, looking at it this way, okay? So what do I have to do is basically I got to come in this way. As I come in closer to this bottom, it'll start looking that way more. Okay, one of the biggest problems in turning platters is a lot of times you're dealing with a really thin piece of wood. Sometimes you can buy these milled pieces right here, 1 inch thick. You can still turn platters that thin. But the most important part now is how do you mount your wood, okay? And again, the most important when you're dealing with a thin piece of wood is basically mounting this piece of wood perpendicular to your ways, or if you want to think of it, parallel to your headstock. And you've got to get it pretty perfect in there. Now again, like I told you, I love to turn my bowls between centers, live center, drive center. A little bit exaggeration, but this is the one I use on my larger bowls. But if you think of this is basically a paddle drive. If I go ahead and I put this up against here, and I go ahead and I take my tailstock and push it in up there, this paddle down the bottom can basically go into the wood more than the top one, and what you'll land up with is a cant on your wood. Now just like what happened with the person's platter there, you'll turn it and you'll turn the bottom side of it and you'll land up with a thinner area than a thicker area, and then when you reverse turn it, you're going to land up with a platter half this size. So again, mounting is very important. If you got plenty of wood, paddle drive is okay, but what I do recommend is a step drive. Everybody familiar with a step drive? You got multiple teeth, it grabs it nice, it usually has a flat area. I can go ahead and push it in there with my tailstock, and it's going to give me a flat surface, and it will mount pretty close to perpendicular. So I do like the step centers a lot. Another great way of mounting your platters is with a faceplate. This is my favorite faceplate. Does it look like an overkill? Pretty big overkill. It's a great way to turn your medium to large size platters. But what's great about a faceplate is that this one here has so many holes, I can adjust my screws, which is really important when you're dealing with something that thin. So if I got something thin, I can have my screws sticking out here a ½ inch, and I'll probably fill this whole faceplate up with screws. Okay, if I had it a little bit thicker, then I possibly would use maybe half of them at 3/4. And if I had more, I could use an inch screw or an inch and a quarter and only use 5 or 6 screws. So faceplates is a great way to mount platters. And again, especially when you got milled surfaces, you can go put it right to it. Also, if you have a platter, a large piece of wood like this, You can go ahead and turn it between centers and go ahead and get a flat area and then put the faceplate on there. This is a small faceplate. Again, it has 4 screw holes. What's the problem with this? Is the only thing you can do is use long screws. I wouldn't be able to use it on a platter this thin, okay? What I would do, this is my wife's faceplate, I'd go back to the drill and go ahead and drill, 4, 6, 8 more holes. Some of these faceplates that are aluminum, they're real easy to go ahead and drill the holes in there. Okay. Worm chuck, that's what I got on here right now. I got one stuck in this piece of wood right here. Again, this is another great way to turn medium to large platters. It kind of gives you a warning. If something goes wrong with your wood and it starts wobbling, it'll give you a little bit of a warning. And by the way, most of the time, whether I'm turning between centers, whether I'm turning with a faceplate, or whether I'm turning with the wood screw, once I go ahead and get it mounted and I'm doing the bottom, I go ahead and put I go ahead and turn my tenon, okay? Because anytime, you'll get a warning. Like I said, even with the screw, it'll start wobbling. If you go ahead and hit it with your tool rest, you can go ahead and mess up the screw holes that are in your wood, and it will give you a little bit of a warning. First thing to do, shut that lathe off. Go ahead and chuck it up, and you can finish the platter. Again, sometimes you do get too much screw sticking out, and you can correct that. You can make up basically spacers, and that's all this is for me, is a spacer. And it's a large spacer. It will give pressure a lot further out on the, and again, it's a great way to do turning. You can get these screw chucks all different sizes. That's a screw chuck. It actually goes to this small chuck right here. So on smaller platters, you can use smaller screws. Any questions so far on what I'm covering? Okay. All right, what I think I'm going to do now, I've got a couple other things I want to go over, but I want to go ahead and turn first, and then go over some of the tool things, and then we'll go ahead and discuss the rest of this.
Can you use glue joints or?
Okay. Since you brought that up, I'll go ahead and get into that, okay? How many people here have used glue blocks? One? Okay. I know Jim uses it on his, he uses it on his palm trees, okay? And a lot of times with end grain, when you're dealing with end grain and you go ahead and you turn your tenon and you put your chuck on there and you're tightening down your chuck, you'll compress those strings more or less, especially in the palm. So the best thing to do is go ahead and take a piece of wood and go ahead and put it on the bottom and glue it on there. You got a piece of hardwood here on the softwood. And Jim will tell you, you use that foam glue type thing?
Yeah, the stuff that you gotta have water on, you gotta put water on. Put it?
Gorilla glue, right. Gorilla foam, yeah. Polyurethane glue. And it'll really stick real good. And again, now you got a real hard base here, okay? Another thing that glue blocks are really well known for when you use them is, let's say you buy a piece of wood from Keith here, and you got a 6-inch beautiful piece of wood, and you want to use that whole piece of wood. You want a 6-inch vase or a 6-inch bowl. Go ahead and use a waste block. I call it waste blocks then. You go ahead and use a waste block. And you can go ahead and basically glue it on there, turn it all the way you want it, and you basically have your piece 6 inches long, and then you come back here and you go ahead and start working your waste block off, and you're going to basically use as much of the wood as possible. And again, that happens a lot here when you've got a real thin piece of wood, and you can just picture it. And again, I have a little tenon on there, and I go ahead and I glue on my my glue block or waste block, and I've got, you know, something there. And again, on a larger platter, you use a larger piece. On a smaller platter, you can go ahead and use a smaller piece. Again, at Christmas time, I did a lot of production, small little platters I did for Christmas. The glue blocks work real well. You can take a dowel and you get a chop block and you go ahead and right on down, you cut up 15, 20 of the glue blocks, and you go ahead and put them on there, and the next day you turn them. Now, on this one here, you can see a little bit of a recess. Now, you always hear, you know, go ahead and use a recess for your chuck, because it spreads out the pressure equally all around it. The things you got to remember about this glue block is, one, it's usually end grain. If you put it between and use a paddle drive, you're going to go ahead and split it, okay? But what's nice about this, again, if you picture it, it gets it away from your headstock, and you can go ahead and turn this whole piece without reverse turning. In other words, I can put it in there, I can go ahead and hollow this out, the front part of my platter, and then I can come in here with slicing cuts and finish the back, and then go ahead and then come in here with a parting tool, and if you can see that, just come in with a slant, and you do your bottom, and you're done. So production work, glue blocks are really, really good. But again, I don't recommend glue blocks for demonstrations because they do have a certain failure rate, and I guarantee you if you're up here doing a demo, it goes a lot higher, okay? And again, another thing to think about, again, for fast turning, I don't recommend going through the hassle of putting that little groove on. I usually put the tenon on there only if I want to go ahead and get away from the tailstock, and I'm going to do it all in one sitting. And another thing, please, when you're turning platters, whenever you can, always use your tailstock. Okay, there are times when you can't, but always use that tailstock. That tailstock will let you know when something's going wrong with either the joint or something wrong with your screw chuck. It'll start wobbling, and again, first thing to do is go ahead and turn your tenon, because then you can shut your lathe off and you can go ahead and chuck it up, and you're going to save that piece of wood. Okay, now this is exaggerated. This is not the one that's exaggerated. This is the one that's exaggerated. You can see how that's at a slant. And if you go ahead and you go perpendicular, you're going to see air underneath there and then air underneath here. Now if I go ahead and take my chuck, let me open it up a little bit. Now this is not going to fit it. But if I go ahead and take my chuck and I pushed it flush up against here, it's not going to fit it. And put my jaws flush up against here, you can see this is sticking up and this is sticking up. And when I crank down on my chuck, all you're going to do is come down, and what you're going to do is going to break that joint, or you're just going to top it off. So again, production work, real fast type things, what I do, I recommend, is just go ahead. This dowel is machined. It's 360 degrees, no flat spots. Go ahead and just put it on there. Try and get your piece of wood, you know, perpendicular to your ways. And again, once you put it on there, go ahead and get your tenon on there first. Any questions as far as glue blocks? I wasn't going to mention until the end, and I was going to lightly touch it, but most of the people haven't used it. So again, glue blocks are really good, really good to use. I like them on my small platters, you know, 10, 12 inches maximum. The faceplates and the screw chucks, medium to large. In fact, I use them on, you know, 27-inch platters and things. Oh yeah, Sam called me just before I came here, and he wanted me to he said, tell everybody about, you know, putting in coves and beads on platters. And he's speaking of experience here. And Al Sturrett will do this. Unbelievable. He can sit there with a detail gouge and go right on through doing his curves and all in one motion, okay? But what Sam wanted me to tell you is that when you're doing a platter and you're putting beads and coves on the inside and on the outside, don't put your coves at the same time, at the same distance from the outside.
Make lots of rings.
You'll land up with a real small platter and extra rings on the side, okay? And he called me to tell you that.
Like his purple one?
Yeah. And again, as far as displaying platters, Sam's got his platters, you know, sitting around his walls all over the place, so, but they're all looking at you. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, what we're gonna do is turn the platter. I'm sorry, I've had a sore throat for a few days, I'm about ready to lose my voice here. Okay, again, screw chucks are really a great way to turn, but again, the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get it on here, I hope. And it already been on once or twice, so I don't want to strip it. Okay. And as you screw it in, even if you're off a little bit, what it's going to do, it's going to tighten down onto your spacer here, and it'll give you a pretty tight joint there. Okay? And again, things to remember about a platter. Again, is the thickness of the platter. I meant to show you. I went a little bit far in with my screw, and I've got about enough room to put about a 16th inch tenon on there without going through there. Another thing, a lot of people, I wanted to show you, they like to go ahead, and I told you put the tenon on first, but there are different types of tenon. You can use a compression or you can use an expansion, okay? Now this platter here was used, on this platter I used an expansion on this one. And as you can see, what I did, since it was in the expansion mode, while I still had it on the screw chuck.
Could you hold it up, Gene? Thank you.
While I still had the screw chuck in there, I basically went ahead and finished all this area in here because my chuck was basically expansion. So I basically finished all this area here. And then afterwards, I'd use a vacuum chuck after I reverse chucked it, and I just cleaned it up. And it's really a good way to do it with the expansion. The thing is, you got to watch out when you're doing thin platters. And the reason is, it's hard to judge how far you're in. And a lot of times when you're doing expansion, using an expansion chuck, a lot of times you'll leave this area here a lot thicker. And it's really hard to get a real good form, to me. Now, people that do it all the time, you know, I'm sure they can just, you know, whack it right out and they know exactly where they are. But I find that this area right in here will seem a little bit more bulkier, and it's just something to know about. And again, this is, again, just one of the platters I did, and you know I do a lot of the embellishing area of it. And again, I love platters. You can put it down and you can see it all. And again, this one here is similar to that other one. And again, you see how that's looking at you, and I'm trying to get, on these platters, I use the grain more important than the size. In fact, this platter here could have been bigger, but because I was more concentrated on getting my grain lined up and right, I gave up the bigness of the larger circumference just to get that grain the way it looked. And again, this piece here, again, a platter. And again, your embellishments there, and it's a great way to show what you're working, all the work you're doing as far as embellishing. Okay, let's get back to turning the platter. again, on platters, you're dealing with a thin piece of wood. And it depends on the size of the platter. The larger the size, your circumference out there is going to have a whole lot more force. If this lathe was turning, let's say, at 1,000 RPM, and this was, let's say 24 inches platter, that circumference is doing a lot more force coming around than something this size. So if you move your tool rest around and you go ahead and you hit it, again, you're going to probably mess up the screws that are inside this platter. And it's going to let you know, because it's going to immediately start wobbling on you. Again, that's why the first thing I do is I go ahead and I put it on a tenon, because the next thing I do is I stop that lathe, I go ahead and run my chuck up in it, and I'd be able to save that platter. Okay, so let's go ahead and do just what I said. Let's go ahead and try and get a tenon.
Let's get you on.
What? Yeah, I'm not there yet. I gotta talk. Boy, that don't look like it's lining up.
Better move over.
They start putting that on.
Okay, I may have to move this. Now, one time that was trued out. And as you can see, it's not trued out right now. And I don't have that much room to true it out. Okay, let's go ahead and put the tenon on even though it's not true. Okay, it's not true. I'm not going to true it out. What I'd like to do is as I go ahead and work on the bottom, it's going to true out. So I'm just going to go ahead and work on the bottom. Again, the best way to do the bottom of the bowl, the platter, is with pulled cuts. Okay, and the reason is, as you turn a bowl, you're looking at it this way and it's turning this way. But if you think about it, here it's turning this way, and I'm going to be actually going downhill like we should be doing with a pull cut. So basically a pull cut is going to be pushing your fibers into each other, and that's usually the best cut. Now I say usually the best cut. It's always good to do a cut, shut the lathe off, and see how it's cutting the wood. If you're dealing with burls or whatever, it doesn't, you may get a bunch of different cuts. And if you look at this piece of wood, can you get on that wood here? You can see this area here is real rough and real rough right here. And the reason is that this is camphor. Camphor is normally a soft piece of wood, and it has basically, this is hard, this is soft, this is hard, this is soft. Now I know in my mind, no matter how good I am, that I'm not going to be able to cut this real smooth and go right to 180 or 220 sandpaper. And the reason is you can see that this is softer wood, harder wood, so as I turn, you're going to get a little bit of tear out. But again, on the platters, as far as cuts go, the most important thing is, remember, you don't want to put your force into the platter towards the headstock. The best cut, even though it's pull cut, is most of your force needs to go down on your tool rest and pull this way, okay? When you do these wing platters and everything, it becomes really apparent. Basically what you do is you come out here with your tool And then basically, once you feel it drop off, then what you do is you come in and you put your force down on the tool rest and you're cutting this way. This is your force this way, not this way, okay? Because if you put the force in this way, the thinner you get, you're gonna start getting chatter. And once you start getting chatter, there's no way of getting rid of it. And I didn't bring it. But I had these, you see these one-way rests with the two, like roller skating wheels on. You'll have to put it up there to try and steady it, or your hand. Okay, let's see how it looks here. And again, all I'm doing is coming up with some type of form. And my objective is to come in here thinner and kind of like an OG. And it's a lot harder. It's a lot easier doing this at home than standing up here. Okay, let's go ahead and swap this out right here. And again, stop it and check out the way it's cutting. You learn a lot more from a stop lathe than you do from a spinning lathe. I'm telling you. Stop your lathe often and check it out, and you'll learn a lot more. Before I get this too thin, I want to go ahead and true out this area here because somehow I got it out of frame. Still tell I'm going to lose at least an eighth of an inch because it's not out around there. So let's go ahead and back and finish the bottom, and then we'll boy, it's got a crack in it too. See that crack right there? Right there. All right, let me go ahead and just a few more white cups there. Again, most of my force is down on the floor. Come in here on my antenna, I'm going to put a little bit of a I'm going to show you a little trick here. This is a one-way free, and it has a little adapter that I can go ahead and I can put a chuck on. I got so many chucks left, and they're all different. Okay. Okay, most chucks right to tight one this way, Novers not. Okay. This here, you can see I've got it mounted, and I can go ahead and take this off, and it gives you the real good ability to just go ahead and switch it over here, and it's usually trued out really good. And a lot of times on pieces like Ed does, you know, those double bowls type thing, you can use this same thing here on a bowl and form the bottom of it, form the top of it, take a parting tool and cut it. Don't take it off your chucks. Take one of them, hollow it out, take the other one, hollow it out. It comes together really, really nice, and it's really even. Now, I'm afraid here to go any further than this. And the reason is, my tenon is split too. And my only, the only thing I can do is maybe make that tenon a little deeper, but I don't think so. And the reason is that this crack is running here and over here, and it's going through my tenon, and I can't finish it. And I'm not gonna take the chance of, messing up here. So, again, what I would have done was basically come here and undo this one, and since it's all trued up, and I can do that and show it, but I'm not gonna turn it. But,
That's when it goes to the wood pile. I said that's when it goes to the wood pile.
Knock the other way.
okay. Opposite of mine. And it's frustrating when it doesn't work right, but.
You're on a big boy right now.
Actually, now I'm gonna be pulling this out here. Let's see if I can grab that.
Usually the tail socket,
Get what?
the tail socket's locked down.
Yeah, but I'm just moving this in a little bit to give me room for that. I'm trying to get it off that screw. I think I'm getting close. Okay, and then I would just go ahead and take this off. And again, it would run pretty true doing it that way. Again, this is the area where you're gonna get chopped. Okay, if I had it real thin, and this is not real thin, but if I had it thinner than this, I'd have come up with some type of rest, a steady rest in the back here, so I can put pressure on there. As you can see on these pieces here on my rim, I gotta put in pressure this way. So a lot of times I'll leave my rims a little bit thicker than that. I'm sorry I can't turn this, but I'm just feeling it's just not safe. It's got a pretty good crack in it. Any questions?
Would you use a pull cut or a push cut?
No, on the inside, it's the same thing. It would be a push cut. And basically what you're doing, if you think about your fibers, what you're doing is you're laying down the fibers and you're pushing it in, you're pushing fiber against fiber, and you get a lot smoother cut. That's normally, okay? A lot of times when you're dealing with a lot of figured wood, burls and stuff, your fibers are all which way. That's why I say stop the lathe, see the type of cuts you're getting from the wood, and adjust from there. Okay. And I'm sorry that we didn't finish it, but yes.
Without it turned on, would you show how you would hold your tools to form a bead on that front?
On the bead on it,
Yeah,
you mean like those?
yeah.
Okay. Okay, basically, there's several tools I use, okay? This one here, I usually do to start. It's thin, and I can come in there and put a thin cut in there. And again, I use the parting tool, and again, I'll drop it a little bit to cut it and try not to give as much pressure in. In here, when you're putting your beads on, you don't worry about it chattering that much, because if it chatters, all it's going to show is basically inside that groove. And on those there, you're filling it up. So it's not really that important. Also, probably chatter will actually hold those stones in there a little bit better too. But even though it's moving this way, you're still getting a pretty smooth cut in it. And again, go ahead and doing the crystals and everything, that's a whole different thing. That something like that I'd have to take and do a demo on it, because it takes a lot more than an hour that I have here. Any questions?
How do you get the bottom as flat as you can?
As flat as you can?
So you don't have any
Okay.
rise in the center, which is pretty common, or
Okay, first,
undulations?
again, it depends on what you're using, but basically, you can put it between centers. Let me take this off. Okay. Such as this. Now, let's just say this log wasn't cut, it didn't have it was just totally round, okay? You can come up here and basically, use a screw chuck, whatever, in here. Now you're talking about here, okay? You want to
I'm
chuck.
talking about the bottom of your plate, platter. How do you get that flat?
Inside finish.
The inside piece?
Yeah.
Okay,
So, because in a bowl, you're never making it flat. You always make it totally rounded to the bottom.
that's correct. Again, that's why your cuts on your platter is basically down on the tool rest and basically coming in here like this. If you're doing, the wing platters, okay? Let me see if I can just turn this down a little bit. Okay, on wing platters, you're basically coming in here like this, and you're rubbing it. Boy, that's really getting bad. But what you'd be doing is coming in here and going in this way. And you go straight as you can that way. Okay, and also, and I didn't bring the tool with me, but again, it's like a bowl gouge, but it has a fingernail grind, real narrow, and it's got more of like a 70-degree angle on it. And again, it's just like when you're doing that curve in a bowl, okay? That's basically the same type of tool. I'm coming in there cross like that, and again, I'm shaving it. I'm doing it real lightly type thing. And again, a lot of times a platter, turning a platter like this, if you got the wood turning a platter like this, just remember to turn a fairly broad bottom, turn your bowl, and then cut your sides off, and you got a platter. I mean, it's pretty close to that. Now, most of my platters are not totally flat. I usually put, a certain amount of curve in there, but again, the angle of your bowl gouge going this way and pushing this way, you can get a pretty flat cut, okay? And if you have to, you can come along here and basically go this way, but it's the same way, not in, but down on the tool rest and just basically shave, and you can get a pretty flat cut to it.
Do you use scrapers at all?
No, not really. Again, I see people use round nose negative rake scrapers. I do on bowls, but on platters, it's usually, if I can cut it, I'll cut it, type of thing.
Well, one of the things I think about scrapers is you do get more resistance, and a platter being thinner, you're going to get more vibration.
You're gonna get more chatter probably, that's right. And, it's just that, without sides, I think you cut this way, it's so much easier than in a bowl. In a bowl, there's no way you're gonna be able to come in like this And again, if you look at my bowl gouges, there are two different grinds on them, my bowl gouges. You know, this is, they're both the same, but this one is, you know, way further back. You know, I bring it way further back. So again, when I'm cutting this way, you know, I can come in and have a more of a cut and more of a flatter cut. Again, don't be afraid to play with your, you know, your wings swept back a little bit different. You know, that's the whole name of the game, is basically what's important. Again, let me just real quickly say something here. As far as tools go, I really think people should go ahead and master the basic tools. Okay, the basic tools are basically your bowl gouge, detail gouge, your skew, you know, and parting tool. And what I mean by mastering a tool, it's basically getting that tool to do what you want it to do. If you get that tool to do what you want to do with your basic tools, you know, that's great. Then when you see these things at the, you know, at the shows and everything, I think Tom introduced me to this one. I don't even know what it's called, the V scraper, you know, type thing.
Spear point.
The what?
Spear point.
Spear point. Okay, it's good. It puts great V grooves in there. Okay, but basically, I can do that same thing with a point of a skew. Okay, this is my basic tool. This just makes my life a little bit easier. And especially when you come to hollowing. When you come to hollowing, you're gonna see all sorts of tools out there. You know, but if you look at the people that have been doing it for a while, they still got their basic tool, you know, and that's what they master. Yes, you can go on to those captive things, which make it a little bit easier. You don't have that torque and stuff in it. But if you master your tools and get it to do what you want it to do, then again, that's what's important. Any questions or anything? All righty.
Thank you.